In the stillness of the night, Earth appeared serene. The stars twinkled softly in the distance, a faint reminder of the endless universe. On the surface, everything seemed peaceful. The bustling cities were silent, the world's noise quieted, as if holding its breath. But deep in space, far beyond the grasp of human eyes, something was stirring a shift that no one could sense, but one that would change everything. Captain Elias Core stood on the observation deck of the Valiant, gazing out into the vast black expanse of space. He watched as the Earth slowly grew smaller, a pale blue dot in the distance. The journey had been long, but it was finally time. The mission was complete, and it was time for humanity to leave. But there was no celebration, no sense of victory. It was as if the weight of the universe itself had pressed upon them, and they were unsure of what the future held. The crew aboard the Valiant moved silently through the ship's hallways, their footsteps muffled by the hum of the engines. The ship, a sleek and advanced piece of human engineering, had been built for this exploration, discovery, and now, departure. Yet, despite its capabilities, something felt amiss. A heavy silence had settled over the crew, as if everyone knew this was not just another routine mission. In the distant reaches of space, a council of alien beings watched this quiet exodus unfold. They were the ones responsible for the mission's success. They had been observing the humans from the shadows, studying them, and ultimately guiding their efforts. But they knew more than the humans did. There were secrets, buried deep within the council's chambers, secrets that only a few knew. The council's chamber was dimly lit, the walls covered in intricate alien designs that seemed to move and shift as if alive. At the center of the room, a large holographic display flickered to life, showing a detailed map of the galaxy. A series of glowing dots marked the path of human ships, and at the farthest point, Earth itself shone brightly, a beacon of life. In a dark sea of stars, the leader of the council, a tall, angular figure named Archon, stood before the display. His eyes glowed with a deep, unsettling hue. He was not a creature of emotion, but even he could sense the magnitude of the moment. Earth had always been a point of interest for his people, and now, the humans were leaving. For the council, this event was both an end and a beginning. But what most didn't know was that their decision to help humanity would come at a great cost. "We should have done this years ago," said one of the council members, a voice crackling through the room's speaker system. It belonged to a creature known as Zella, a being of shadow and light. "The humans are too dangerous. Their technology grows too quickly. Soon they'll be capable of far more than we can control." Archon didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stared at the holographic map, his mind calculating the risks. He knew what needed to be done. It was time to press the button. The button that would change everything. The button that had been carefully hidden away, known only to a select few within the council. It was an emergency protocol, one that had been created long before the humans arrived, one that could eradicate any threat. It was supposed to be a fail-safe one that should never have been used. But now, the council was cornered. The humans had become too powerful, and they had to be stopped. Another council member, Dronix, spoke with a sense of urgency. "If we press it now, there's no turning back. We cannot afford to make the same mistake again. We've already lost control once with the humans. We must ensure they don't return." Archon turned his gaze to Dronix. His expression was unreadable. "Do you trust them, Dronix?" he asked, his voice calm but heavy with meaning. There was a long pause before Dronix replied. "I trust them as much as I trust anyone," he said, slowly, "but I don't trust their future. Their technology is advancing too rapidly. They could soon be a threat to our entire galaxy. We cannot let them come back." Archon nodded. "Then we have no choice." He turned towards the control panel, where the final decision awaited. The button was large, its surface glowing with a faint light. It seemed so simple, yet its implications were vast. It had been designed as a last resort, a failsafe, in case the humans became too powerful. It was time to press it. As Archon reached out to activate the protocol, a strange feeling washed over him. Was this the right choice? He had always been a believer in the Council's way control, order, and the preservation of peace. But the humans were different. They were unpredictable, yes, but they were also creative, full of potential. They were the wild card in a universe that had long been ruled by structure and tradition, but it was too late for second thoughts. The decision had been made. In the Valiant, Captain Core turned away from the observation deck, his thoughts heavy with the same sense of unease that had been gnawing at him for days. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the Council had made a mistake. But there was no time to turn back now. They were too far into their mission. As the ship's engines hummed, ready to leave the planet. The final protocol was set into motion. The Valiant began its silent departure, slipping away from Earth's orbit, its crew unaware of the catastrophic decision unfolding in the depths of space. The Council's button had been pressed, and with it, the calm before. The storm was shattered. The Valiant drifted farther from Earth, its engines quietly humming as it cut through the vastness of space. The stars outside shimmered like distant pinpricks of light, indifferent to the tiny human ship making its way into the unknown. Inside, the crew was still, each person lost in their thoughts, their faces reflecting the weight of the mission they had just completed. There was no celebration, no cheer, just a haunting silence that seemed to swallow the ship whole. Captain Elias Core stood by the viewport, staring out into the endless void. The image of Earth shrinking away was a strange feeling. It was home. It had always been home, yet it now seemed distant, almost alien, as if they were leaving behind more than just their planet. It felt as though they were leaving behind a part of themselves, something they couldn't yet understand. Core's hand rested lightly on the console, his fingers tracing the outline of the navigation controls. His mind wandered to the final moments before departure. Everything had been set into motion. The mission had been a success, a step forward in humanity's journey through the stars. And yet, there was an uneasy feeling growing within him, a sense of foreboding that he couldn't shake. In the briefing room, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Mara Sloan, was reviewing the mission data. The silence was thick here, too. She flicked through the holographic screens with practiced ease, but her eyes never seemed to fully focus. Something was off, and she could feel it. She wasn't as experienced as Core, but she had been in enough high-pressure situations to sense when things weren't right. "Captain," she said, her voice breaking the stillness. Core turned from the viewport and walked toward her, his boots echoing in the empty hallway. "There's something strange about the readings," Mara continued, her voice low. "I've checked the data a dozen times, and it doesn't add up. Everything is normal, to normal, too normal." Core leaned over her shoulder, peering at the holographic display. The numbers blinked in rhythm, steady and unchanging. The Valiant was on course, its trajectory locked in for a return to the distant colony station. Nothing about the mission seemed out of place, yet the unease only grew stronger. Mara paused, biting her lip. "It's like Earth is different, somehow, almost like it's already gone. I know it sounds crazy, but the data, it's not showing the planet the way it should." Core's eyes narrowed. He'd had the same thought. He could feel it deep in his gut, the subtle but undeniable sensation that something had shifted, something fundamental had changed. It was as though the Earth they were leaving behind wasn't the same Earth they had known. But what was it? What had changed? The ship continued its journey, the engines purring softly in the background, but the silence aboard the Valiant was deafening, filling every corner of the ship. The crew moved like shadows, their expressions distant and vacant, caught in the same strange feeling that gripped Core and Mara. The usual chatter that accompanied long space voyages was absent, replaced by an eerie stillness that seemed to settle over them all. Core felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, heavier than the gravity of any planet. He turned back to Mara, who was still staring at the screen as if hoping for something to change, but nothing did. "I'll check the external sensors," Core said, his voice steady despite the doubt creeping into his mind. "Maybe there's a glitch in the system." He left the room, his footsteps echoing once again down the quiet corridor. The ship was vast, but in moments like this, it felt smaller, the walls closing in as though the Valiant itself was watching them. Waiting, he arrived at the sensor control room where the external readings were displayed in real time. As his fingers danced over the controls, he could feel the tension in the air, almost tangible. The sensor grid was scanning the void of space ahead, marking every passing asteroid, every shift in cosmic radiation. But as his eyes scanned the readings, a chill crept up his spine. The Earth's signal was still there, yes, but it was faint, distorted. It flickered in and out like a weak signal struggling to find its way through the static of space. Core frowned, reaching out to adjust the settings. He couldn't help but feel that something was terribly wrong. Why would Earth's signal be so weak? They had just left. There was no reason for the signal to be degrading like this, especially so soon. He double-checked the coordinates, no mistake there. But as the flickering signal grew weaker, the questions grew louder in his mind. What was happening on Earth? Had something gone wrong? Had the Council's decision to let them leave triggered some kind of catastrophic event? The buttons under his fingers felt cold, each press sending a ripple of unease through his body. He had always been the calm one, the steady hand in times of chaos. But today, nothing felt steady. It felt as if the universe was shifting under his feet, turning everything they knew upside down. Then, without warning, the signal disappeared completely. Earth's presence in the vastness of space was gone. The room felt colder, darker, as the screen blinked in front of him, showing nothing but empty space. Kor's heart skipped a beat. His mind raced. What had just happened? Where had Earth gone? He turned back to the control room, urgency in his every step. The entire crew needed to know what was happening. The silence had become unbearable, like the calm before a storm, and he knew, deep down, that they weren't going to make it out unscathed. Something terrible had begun, and they were at the center of it all. As he made his way back to the bridge, the weight of the unknown pressed down on him, heavier than the weight of any weapon, any enemy. There was a silence now, a quiet certainty that Earth was no longer their home, and that the consequences of their departure were far greater than any of them could ever have imagined. The Valiant glided through the darkness of space, a ship now lost in its own quiet journey. Captain Elias Kor stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the Noblanc monitor where Earth once appeared. His chest tightened as an unsettling realization dawned on him. The planet was gone, completely gone. He gripped the edge of the console, his knuckles white, as 1,000 questions surged through his mind. Mara Sloan stood nearby, her hands hovering over the controls, but her mind was far away. She had seen the readings. She had seen the disappearing signal. The data on her screen only confirmed what Kor feared. The planet they had called home was no longer in the universe. It was as though Earth had never existed at all. What the hell happened? Mara's voice broke the heavy silence that had settled over the bridge. Kor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned back to the now empty view. The stars seemed to stretch on forever, indifferent to the chaos unfolding aboard the ship. He wished he could find some explanation, anything that could make sense of it. But there was nothing, just the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space. Kor's thoughts were interrupted by the crackle of the intercom. "Captain," the voice of Lieutenant Dre echoed over the com, "we've received a transmission. It's from the Council." The Council. The very beings that had helped humanity reach the stars. The ones who had watched over them, guided them, and now, it seemed, betrayed them. Kor's stomach twisted in dread. He hadn't heard from the Council since the final moments on Earth. The last thing they had told him was that humanity was free to go, that their mission was complete. But now, with Earth's sudden disappearance, he couldn't help but feel that the Council was somehow involved. "Put it through," Kor said, his voice low. A holographic projection of the Council's leader, Archon, flickered to life in front of him. The alien's angular features glowed faintly in the dim light of the bridge. He spoke with a calmness that only made Kor's unease grow. "Captain Kor," Archon's voice was smooth, his tone unreadable. "You must listen carefully. The events unfolding are no accident. You and your crew have unwittingly triggered a sequence that no one could have anticipated." Kor's grip tightened on the console, and Mara exchanged a worried glance with him. They had been set up, he was sure of it now. "What do you mean?" Kor demanded, his voice firm despite the rising panic in his chest. "What the hell happened to Earth?" The alien leader paused, his expression unreadable, as if he was carefully choosing his words. "The decision was made long ago, Captain. The failsafe was always in place, but we did not expect the consequences to unfold in this manner." His voice softened. "We never intended for Earth to disappear." Kor could feel the weight of his next question pressing down on him like 1,000 tons. "What failsafe, Archon? What did you do?" Archon's holographic figure seemed to waver slightly, as if the distance between them had suddenly grown larger. "The button, Captain," he finally said, his voice almost a whisper. "The one we pressed. It was never meant to be used." But the Council. The Council felt that humanity had become too powerful, too unpredictable. "You were growing faster than we could control, and there were concerns. We believed that by removing Earth from the equation, we could stabilize the galaxy. But you didn't think it through, did you?" Kor spat, his voice rising. "You didn't think about the consequences of erasing an entire planet, a whole civilization. What kind of stability is that?" Archon was silent for a moment, and Kor could sense a flicker of regret, almost imperceptible, but there nonetheless. "There are forces at work now," Captain Archon said, his tone much more serious. "The ripple caused by the activation of the button has reached far beyond what we anticipated. A force is coming, one that we cannot control, one that could destroy not just Earth, but everything in its path." Kor felt his heart drop into his stomach. A force that could destroy everything. It was too much to comprehend. "Explain yourself, Archon," Mara said, her voice sharp and demanding. What kind of force are you talking about? The projection of Archon flickered again, and the hologram shifted to show a map of the galaxy, red lights blinking at various points. The blinking red lights seemed to pulse with an ominous rhythm, spreading across the stars. This is the result of your departure, Archon explained, his voice grave. We awakened something ancient, something that had been dormant for millennia. It is now coming to find you, to find the one who triggered this change. Kor's mind raced. An ancient force. What did that mean? He turned to Mara, her face pale with disbelief. Is this real? She asked, her voice trembling slightly. Kor didn't answer immediately. The unease in his gut had now turned to annoying fear. This wasn't just about Earth anymore. It was about survival of the galaxy, and perhaps survival of the human race. We don't have much time, Archon's voice cut through the tension. The force is already on its way. You must return to Earth. The only way to stop this is to activate the second protocol. Kor felt his blood run cold. The second protocol? What did that even mean, return to Earth? Mara asked incredulously. How can we go back when Earth is gone, when it's not even there anymore? Archon's image flickered once more, and his expression hardened. You must trust me, Captain. The only way to stop this is to reverse the damage we've caused. The button must be pressed again. Only then can the force be contained. A shiver ran down Kor's spine. The weight of Archon. Words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. The universe, it seemed, had become a very dangerous place, and they were caught right in the middle of it. The stars outside the Valiant were no longer beautiful. They were distant, cold, and indifferent, and Kor knew they were about to face something far darker than anything they had ever known. A force was coming, and it would be up to them to stop it. But how could they, when everything they had known? Their home was gone. The crew of the Valiant was no longer just a group of explorers. They were the last line of defense in a fight against something much larger than themselves, and it was already too late to turn back. The Valiant cut through space at an unrelenting pace, its crew operating in near silence. The hum of the engines, once a comforting sound, now felt like a ticking clock, reminding them all that they were running out of time. Captain Elias Kor paced the bridge, his thoughts racing faster than the ship. What had they awakened? What was this force? And why had it been sleeping for so long? The stars outside seemed indifferent, their cold light offering no answers, no comfort. Kor turned to Lieutenant Mara Sloan, who was scanning the comms for any sign of a response from the Alien Council. They had heard nothing since Archon's last message, and the weight of that silence hung heavily over the ship. We need to find out more, Kor said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside his mind. Whatever this force is, it's not something we can face blindly. Mara nodded, her fingers flying over the control panel. I'm trying to dig deeper into the Council's files. There has to be something more about this force, something they didn't tell us. A soft beep echoed through the bridge, and Kor's heart skipped a beat. The comm screen flickered to life, revealing a new message. It was encrypted, a high-level transmission that only someone with access to the Council's deepest secrets could send. Kor glanced at Mara, who was already decoding it. As the transmission began to clear, an image appeared on the screen, a series of ancient alien symbols. The symbols seemed to move, shifting and changing, as if they were alive. Kor couldn't help but feel a strange unease settle in his chest. What is this? Mara murmured, her eyes scanning the symbols in confusion. Then, the transmission began to speak, its voice distorted but familiar. It's the ancient archive, Kor whispered to himself. He had heard rumors of such a thing but had never believed. The Council, in its infinite knowledge, had access to the ancient records of the galaxy, records that went beyond time itself. It was said that these archives held the history of the universe, the rise and fall of civilizations long forgotten. The voice from the transmission continued, its tone more chilling with each passing word. The force you have awakened is not a natural one. It is the remnant of an ancient civilization, one that was wiped out eons ago. The creators of the force had powers beyond comprehension, capable of bending space and time to their will. Kor's mind raced. They had unknowingly triggered a force that could manipulate the very fabric of reality. What kind of beings could have had that kind of power, and why were they destroyed? They were destroyed because they became too powerful. The voice continued. They sought to control everything, to impose order on the galaxy, but in the end, their arrogance led to their downfall. The force they left behind was meant to be a safeguard, a failsafe. It would seek out and destroy any civilization that threatened to repeat their mistakes. Kor's breath caught in his throat. He was beginning to understand. The force they had awakened wasn't just a threat, it was a judgment. It wasn't about conquering or ruling, it was about erasing. Those who were deemed too dangerous. At the transmission flickered again, and the image of the symbols began to dissolve, replaced by a map of the galaxy. A red dot blinked ominously, marking a location at the farthest reaches of the known universe. It was heading straight for them. The Force is already on its way, the voice concluded. You have two choices, Captain Core. You can attempt to reverse the damage by returning to Earth and activating the second protocol, or you can prepare for the consequences. There will be no other options. The Force will come, and it will not stop until it has completed its task. Core's mind was racing. The choice seemed simple: reverse the damage, stop the Force before it could destroy everything, or face certain destruction. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that the situation wasn't as straightforward as it seemed. The second protocol, the one Arkan had mentioned, was a mystery. What was it, and how would it stop something so powerful? Could they really contain this Force, or would they only be playing into its hands? The fear gnawing at Core's stomach grew stronger. This wasn't just about saving humanity. This was about survival on a cosmic scale. He glanced over at Mara, who had a grim expression on her face. Captain, if we try to go back to Earth, we risk triggering something worse, she said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty in her eyes. What if this second protocol isn't enough? What if it's just another way for the Council to control us? Core nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. He wasn't sure he trusted the Council anymore, but what choice did they have? The Force was coming, and it would be impossible to stop without taking some kind of action. But was the Council's plan the right one? We don't have the luxury of waiting to find out, Core said, his voice firm. We have to act now. Mara, start charting a course for Earth. We'll follow through with the protocol and hope it works. We don't have much time. Mara's fingers flew over the controls, inputting the coordinates for Earth. The ship's engines hummed to life, and the Valiant began to shift course. The crew was silent, each person aware of the gravity of the situation. As the ship surged forward, Core stood at the helm, staring out into the vast emptiness. The galaxy was a cold and indifferent place, full of mysteries they would never understand. But one thing was certain: whatever this Force was, it would not stop until it had completed its mission. And if humanity was to have any hope of survival, they would have to confront it head-on. The journey ahead would be fraught with danger, and the decisions they made now could mean the difference between life and death for billions of lives. But for Core, there was no turning back. It was time to face the unknown, to find the answers, and to stop the Force before it could wipe everything out. The universe had thrown them into a game. They didn't understand, but Core would play, and he would fight, no matter the cost. The Valiant hurtled through the darkness, its engines roaring as it sped toward Earth, a planet they had once known as home but now was shrouded in mystery. The galaxy outside remained indifferent, stars and nebulae passing by in quiet eternity. Unaware of the human struggle unfolding within the ship, Captain Elias Core stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the holographic map ahead, but his mind was a whirlwind of questions. Every decision, every move, seemed to carry the weight of an entire galaxy. As they neared Earth's coordinates, Core couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The planet was still gone, wiped out without a trace. Yet, the Force they had awakened was still coming. The red dot on the map pulsed with an urgency that sent a chill down his spine. He wasn't sure what awaited them, but whatever it was, it would change everything. Mara Sloan, standing beside him, was equally tense. She had been silent for much of the journey, her mind consumed with the unknown. She had no answers, only more questions. What was this Force they had triggered? What would they find when they arrived at Earth's coordinates? The unknown hung heavy in the air, suffocating every crew member. The second protocol, Mara murmured, breaking the silence. Do you think it will work? Core glanced at her, his expression unreadable. We don't have a choice, Mara. If it doesn't work, we're out of options. A heavy silence followed his words. The crew knew the stakes. Everyone aboard understood that this wasn't just a mission anymore. It was a fight for survival, for the future of everything they had ever known. The second protocol had been designed for emergencies, like this, but whether it could stop the Force that was coming, Core wasn't sure. They approached the Earth system faster now, the planet's absence still weighing on their minds. The space that had once been filled with the familiar blue and green of their home was now an empty void. The distant stars seemed to mock them. Distant and cold, Core's gaze shifted back to the red blinking dot on the map, the path the Force was taking. It was closer now, almost too close to Earth's original location. His heart pounded in his chest, each second dragging them further into the unknown. "Captain," came the voice of Lieutenant Dre from the communications panel, his tone sharp. "We're picking up something. It's a signal, but it's unlike anything we've ever encountered." Core's eyes snapped to the comms panel, where Dre's face was drawn with concern. "What kind of signal? It's not alien. It's not human. It's like an echo, a distortion, in space itself. It's coming from the coordinates where Earth used to be." The hairs on the back of Core's neck stood up. An echo, a distortion. Could it be that the Force had already begun its work, or was it something else entirely? Something that had been left behind by the ancient civilization that had once controlled the galaxy? "We're going to need to investigate," Core said, his voice steady despite the unease building inside him. "Mara, set course for the source of the signal. Dre, stay on it. I want every detail on that signal." Mara's fingers moved swiftly over the controls, the ship altering its course. The tension in the air thickened. The Valiant now headed into uncharted territory. The silence seemed to deepen, each moment stretching into eternity. Core knew the Force was close now, closer than it had ever been, and with every passing second, they were moving deeper into its path. As they approached the signal source, Core felt an almost tangible sense of dread settle over him. There was something wrong with this place, something unnatural. The stars around them seemed to blur and shift, as if reality itself was beginning to warp. The Valiant lurched slightly, and Mara's hands gripped the controls tightly, her knuckles pale. "It's getting worse," she said, her voice tight with strain. "The ship's systems are starting to destabilize." Core's jaw clenched. The Force was beginning to interfere with their technology, bending space and time around them. He didn't know what they would find, but it was clear that whatever it wasn't something they could just fight off with weapons or technology. The signal grew stronger, the distortion in space around them more pronounced. As they reached the center of the signal source, Core's heart raced. What they had expected to find was nothing like what they saw. Before them lay a massive rift in space itself. It wasn't just an empty void, it was a tear in the fabric of reality, an abyss that seemed to stretch on forever. The Valiant hovered at the edge of this rift, the stars around them twisting and warping as though caught in the pull of a gravity they couldn't see or understand. The rift pulsed, a living entity of pure energy, and Core felt his stomach drop as he realized what they were looking at. "This is it," Core said, barely a whisper. "This is what we awakened." Mara stared in horror at the rift, her eyes wide with disbelief. "What do we do now, Captain?" Core's mind raced. They had come here to find answers, but now they had uncovered something far more terrifying than they had ever imagined. The Force that had been unleashed wasn't just a weapon, it was a doorway, a gateway to something beyond comprehension. It was ancient and powerful, and it was far more than they could handle on their own. He turned to face his crew, his voice low but resolute. "We have no choice but to go through. We need to understand this. We need to find the truth." The Valiant inched closer to the rift, the entire ship vibrating with the energy radiating from it. Every fiber of Core's being screamed to turn away, to escape, but he knew they couldn't. Not now. Not when they were so close to unraveling the mystery of the Force and, possibly, finding the way to stop it. The rift pulsed again, sending a wave of energy crashing over the ship, shaking it to its core. Core held his breath, waiting, knowing that whatever they faced next would change everything. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers they could not predict, but there was no turning back. They had crossed the point of no return. As the Valiant moved closer to the rift, Core felt a strange sense of clarity wash over him. This was the beginning of something far greater than they had ever imagined. And whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The Force was coming, and it was up to them to stop it. The Valiant hovered on the edge of the rift, its engines barely whispering against a thick, unnatural pull of the energy surrounding them. Captain Elias Core stood at the helm, his eyes locked on the swirling mass of distorted space in front of him. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend and warp within the rift, sending ripples through time and space itself. There was no going back now. They had ventured into the unknown, and now the only way out was forward. Mara Sloan, standing at his side, was watching the readouts intently, her fingers gliding over the controls as the ship's systems struggled to adapt to the chaotic forces at play. "The ship's holding together, but just barely," she said, her voice tight with concentration. "Whatever is on the other side of this rift, we have no idea what we're walking into." Core nodded grimly, his hand clenched around the armrest of his chair. He had always been the calm one, the steady presence that kept the crew grounded in moments of crisis. But this was different. This wasn't just another unknown planet or distant galaxy. This was something beyond comprehension, a force that defied everything they knew about the universe. He could feel the weight of their mission pressing down on him, knowing that the fate of more than just humanity hung in the balance. As they moved closer to the rift, the ship trembled again, the energy field outside intensifying. The stars around them seemed to twist and shudder as if the rift itself was alive, pulling everything around it into its gravitational maw. The distance between them and the rift had been shrinking, but now, it felt as though the very space itself was bending to draw them in faster. "We need to decide now," Kor said, turning to Mara. "Do we go through or pull back?" Mara didn't answer right away. Her fingers danced across the controls, but it was clear that the decision wasn't one they could make lightly. She stared at the data flickering on the screen, trying to make sense of the impossible. "If we go through," she said slowly, "there's no telling what we'll find. We could be stepping into a new galaxy, or worse, we could be stepping into the very heart of whatever is controlling this force." Kor's mind raced as the consequences of their next move came crashing down on him. They had no choice but to push forward. The force that had been unleashed was far too powerful to ignore, and the only way to stop it, to learn how to control it, was to enter the rift. The second protocol, whatever it was still their only hope. "Let's do it," Kor said, his voice firm, and for the first time since the mission had begun, a flicker of resolve settled in his chest. "We don't have any other choice." Mara nodded, her expression hardening with determination. Engaging the rift field now. With a final press of a button, the Valiant surged forward, its hull groaning in protest as it passed through the rift's outer boundary. The moment they crossed the threshold, the ship was shaken violently, as if being thrown into another dimension entirely. The stars outside disappeared, replaced by swirling tendrils of light and shadow. The air inside the Valiant seemed to thicken, as if the very space they were in was pressing down on them. The monitors flickered, sending streams of data across the control panels. The ship's systems were struggling to adapt, each readout showing numbers that Kor couldn't fully comprehend. But he didn't need to understand them. He only needed to know that the ship was still intact. "We're through," Mara said, her voice a mixture of awe and fear. "But it's like we're not in normal space anymore. The laws of physics don't seem to apply here." Kor's gaze remained fixed on the view ahead, the swirling mass of color and energy unfolding like a tapestry of the unknown. The rift wasn't just a passage, it was a living thing, a gateway to something beyond their comprehension. And just beyond that, in the distance, a shape began to emerge. It was massive, a towering structure, impossibly large, its surface shimmering with a strange, iridescent glow. It looked like nothing Kor had ever seen, a structure that defied all known laws of architecture, with angles and shapes that seemed to shift and change as they drew closer. "What in the universe?" Mara whispered, her eyes wide with disbelief. The structure seemed to be alive, pulsing with energy, as if it were breathing. It radiated a power that Kor could feel deep in his bones. He could sense the immense force contained within it, a power that could reshape the galaxy if it were released. This, he realized, was the source of the force they had awakened the ancient civilization that had once controlled the galaxy. And now, their creation was about to unleash its full power once more. As they moved closer, the ship began to tremble again, the entire hull vibrating as if it was being pulled toward the structure. The Valiant was no longer in control. It was caught in the gravitational pull of this ancient force. Kor could see it now clearly, the sheer scale of it. It wasn't just a building, it was a city, a civilization frozen in time, its core alive with the energy of a lost era. "We have to stop this," Kor muttered under his breath. His heart was pounding in his chest, and for the first time since the mission began, he felt fear. They were stepping into the heart of an ancient, unknown force, one that could very well destroy everything in its path. As the Valiant drew closer to the structure, Kor's mind raced. They couldn't let this thing, this ancient power, escape. It had to be contained. But how? What could they do against something this powerful, something that had been dormant for millennia? The structure loomed larger now, its surface covered in alien runes and symbols that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. As they neared, the symbols seemed to glow brighter, as if reacting to the Valiant's presence. Kor's heart skipped a beat as the realization hit him. This was no ordinary force, it was a sentient power, a force that could feel them, that could know their intentions. And just as he reached out to make his final decision, a voice boomed through the ship's intercom, deep and resonant, as if it were coming from the structure itself. "Welcome, humans," the voice said, sending a chill down Kor's spine. "You are the ones who have awakened us. You are the ones who will be judged. The Force had spoken, and they were about to face its consequences. The Valiant shuddered violently, its hull groaning under the pressure of the force that seemed to radiate from the ancient structure ahead. Kor's breath caught in his throat as the voice echoed through the ship's intercom, a deep, resonant sound that seemed to vibrate in his very bones. It wasn't just a voice, it was a presence, an ancient intelligence that stretched across the galaxy and beyond. "Welcome, humans," the voice boomed again, its tone both commanding and terrifying. "You are the ones who have awakened us. You are the ones who will be judged." Kor's heart pounded in his chest as he stood frozen, his mind racing to comprehend what was happening. The ship, despite all its power, seemed fragile now, as if they were nothing more than ants standing before a colossus. The structure loomed closer, its surface alive with pulsating lights and alien symbols, each one a puzzle that Kor couldn't begin to decipher. "We have to do something." Mara's voice broke through his thoughts, urgent and shaken. "We can't just sit here and let them control us." Kor's mind snapped back to the present. He had to think fast. The Valiant was caught in the gravitational pull of this ancient force, but it wasn't just the ship they needed to worry about. It was the lives of everyone aboard, the entire human race, and the galaxy itself. This force, the ancient civilization, wasn't a weapon. It was a judgment, and it was coming for them. But Kor couldn't allow fear to paralyze him. They were here for a reason, to understand, to contain, and to stop whatever had been unleashed. He turned to Mara, his eyes burning with determination. "Mara, get ready to bring up the second protocol. Whatever it takes, we need to neutralize this force." Mara nodded, her fingers flying over the controls, but her expression was taut with anxiety. "The systems are still in flux," she said, her voice tight. "I don't know if we can bring up the protocol while we're this close. The rift itself is interfering with our tech, but I'll try." Kor's heart raced as the ship inched closer to the massive structure. The presence around them was growing more oppressive, as though the very air in the ship was thickening, pressing down on them. The Force was aware of them now, watching them, waiting. There was no turning back. The voice spoke again, this time more insistent, as though it was testing them. "You have crossed into our domain. You have disturbed the balance. You will be judged, but you will not be alone. You will see what happens to those who challenge the ancient order." The Valiant lurched again, and Kor braced himself against the control panel. The entire ship vibrated, as if it were on the verge of being torn apart by the overwhelming power that surrounded them. They were so close now that Kor could almost feel the pulse of the structure itself, the rhythm of something far older and more powerful than anything they had ever encountered. "Captain," Mara's voice was tight with urgency. "The protocol, it's not working, we're being locked out. The structure is interfering with everything." Kor's mind raced. If the second protocol was blocked, they had no other options. They couldn't fight this force. They couldn't escape, but there had to be something, some way to stop it. He looked up at the alien symbols on the structure ahead, their ancient energy swirling like a storm around them. The symbols seemed to glow brighter as the ship neared, as if they were reading them, understanding them. Then, without warning, the ship was shaken once more, a violent tremor that rattled every loose object. Kor's grip on the console tightened as the holographic map flickered, showing the structure's core, now glowing with a brilliant, almost blinding light. "Now," Kor shouted, his voice sharp. "Mara, do it now." With a final, desperate press of a button, the ship's emergency systems flared to life, sending a pulse of energy into the rift. It was a last-ditch attempt to overload the structures, influence a final gamble to disrupt whatever was controlling them. Kor held his breath as he watched the readings change. It was all they had. The rift shimmered and groaned in response, the light from the structure blinding them as the energy pulse collided with it. For a moment, everything seemed to freeze. The stars outside, the ship, the rift itself all held still, suspended in a strange, eerie calm. And then, the shockwave hit. The Valiant was thrown backward, spinning uncontrollably through the distorted space. The force of the blast ripped through the ship, sending alarms blaring and warning lights flashing in every corner. Kor was thrown against the console, his vision blurring as the ship was battered by the sheer power of the shockwave. The crew screamed as they were thrown from their seats, their bodies slamming into the walls. In the chaos, Kor's thoughts became a blur. The rift had responded. He had hoped for that, but at what cost? The ship was spiraling out of control, and the ancient force was far from done with them. It was only a matter of time before they felt its full wrath. The voice spoke again, its tone no longer booming, but soft and chilling. "You have tried to fight, you have tried to resist, but the judgment is inevitable. You are the architects of your own fate." Core struggled to regain control, his hands shaking as he worked the console. His mind raced for any solution, any chance of survival. They couldn't let this end like this, not after everything they had fought for. They had to finish what they started, no matter the cost. We're not finished yet, Core muttered, as he finally managed to steady the ship's course. The ship was battered, its systems fried and damaged, but they weren't gone yet. Mara, bruised and shaken, stood beside him, her eyes burning with the same resolve. We fight until the end, Captain. We don't give up. Not now. Core looked out at the rift one last time. The ancient force had spoken, and it had given them a choice to resist, to be judged, or to give up. But he knew one thing for sure. They wouldn't give up. Not while there was still a chance. And with that, they surged forward once more, into the heart of the unknown, ready to face whatever consequences awaited them. The fight was far from over.